because all of those people had a healthy dose of imposter syndrome, and it made them think, I am not as clever as the person next to me. I am not as talented. I am not as good. I am not as brilliant or bright. And so let me find out, does everyone else in the team feel the same? And we sat down in a team meeting, and I started and said, listen, why don't we go around the room and share what we're afraid of? And I said, here's my thing. I am afraid of not being good enough. I'm afraid that every single person in the room is smarter than me. And help me with that. And it absolutely broke the barriers. Every single person in the room was afraid of something very, very similar.
Welcome to the Manage Self, Lead Others Leadership podcast with Nina Sunday for experienced and aspiring people managers. This show will help you explore ways to become a more intentional leader. Each episode, host Nina Sunday speaks with some of the brightest business minds on the planet who share a passion to elevate and transform team culture. Workplace culture hides in plain sight. Is yours flourishing? Join the movement to make your workplace a better place to work. Are you ready? Because it's time to manage self, lead others.
Powerful words motivate people. Gina Balarin uses words as playthings to influence. Author of The Secret Army, Leadership, Marketing and the Power of People, with a master's degree in management communication, Gina Balarin is a highly qualified marketer. Fellow of the Chartered Institute of Marketing, Fellow of the Australian Marketing Institute, Certified Practicing Marketer. International keynote and TEDx speaker holding a BA degree in drama, once a ballet dancer and magician's assistant, formerly living in Oxfordshire, now in Australia. Welcome, Gina Balarin.
Thank you so much for having me, Nina. It's my pleasure to be here.
And I was so excited to go through your book and come up with some important points that we can discuss. And one is at the very back. You just make it so easy. You've got all the lessons that are summarized. You've got a summary of the whole book. What author does that? That is such a gift. Excellent.
Well, thank you. It seemed like a no-brainer to me. And so if I took the time to summarize all of it, I might as well put it in one place.
Exactly. And then there's a bit about telling stories that I want to go through. So section 1 is how treating team members, customers and leaders as human beings. That helps everyone to be more motivated, and it improves productivity. So do you want to, what do you mean by treat them as human beings? What's not treating them as a human being?
Well, let's start with my big hairy ass goal, or BHAG for short.
Yes.
Which is to eliminate suffering at work. And this comes from a long time of being in a workplace where I didn't feel like I was living my full potential, like I was bringing my whole self to work. And effectively, the book became a manifesto about how great leaders can change everything, including the very people that they work for. It can give them a whole new lease on life. It can make them feel like their work is a work home. And so how do you do that? Well, you start by making sure that people are clear about what they're doing, and then you go into why they're doing it. And that arguably is more important. Daniel Pink wrote a book where he included some research about 3 things that motivate people. In fact, it came from his book. I can't remember the name exactly, but it was, Drive, the surprising truth about what motivates people. And it turns out there are 3 things that motivate people: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And if you think about having a great workplace, if you can give your employees autonomy, the ability to work independently, mastery, the ability to get really, really good at what they want to be really good at, and purpose, a sense that they're doing something for a reason, all of a sudden it changes the whole work experience. And suffering, as a result, reduces. Now, I can't eliminate suffering at work on my own, but it is something that everyone I connect with is playing a small part in doing. I don't think any of us want to be drones or automatons. That's what bots are for.
So, yeah, exactly. And so what exactly is it the problem? Is it the attitude of a manager, I'm just paying you to do the job you're paid to do, and you don't need to know the big picture? Is that how they treat us? Like, you only know this, your job is only this much and that's all you have to know. Is that part of it?
That's definitely part of it. If you think that you're cogs in a machine and you don't understand what the machine is doing or why, then of course you're going to feel like what you're doing doesn't really matter. But it's not just about treating people as if they were cogs in a machine. It's also about identifying what makes them come alive and giving them permission to do more of that.
Very good. Yeah. And that also then carries over into their own life, because then they have a sense of meaning and purpose in their own life. 100%. And the other thing is a sense of progress, like skills development and progress. And it's up to a manager to shine a light on the fact is, last year you could only do this, but now look what you're doing. And isn't that great? You know, you're progressing. Do you think that's a good thing?
I think that it's not just up to managers to take responsibility for people's individual career progression and development. It's up to the individuals themselves. I was just reading a LinkedIn post a few days ago, and it resonated deeply with an experience I'd had at work, which is when I waited for some mysterious promotion or some mysterious incentive to come my way, I got really frustrated when a colleague of mine got 2 promotions in the same time that I was just pedaling along. Until I realized something. She was pushing for those promotions. She was doing the work that she needed to do. Yes, the manager was managing both of us, and the manager admittedly was great friends with a friend of mine who got the promotions. But if she hadn't been pushing to say, I want to know what's next, I want to know where I go, I want to know how I can get there, she wouldn't have had those promotions. It was a hard lesson for me to learn.
That's fantastic, Gina. And I can resonate with that, because I can remember in my 20s and early 30s working in a television studio, and I left because I couldn't see a career path for me, but I was waiting for them to find me and discover that I was ambitious. And it's like, I look back now and again, I went, Nina, you really could have negotiated and informed them that you had a bigger picture for your career than just being a production manager for this little show.
Absolutely.
So it's like there's 2 sides to the same coin. Now, you call it the secret army, and there are 3 divisions, and the first division is customers. So my question is, and you are an amazing marketer, why do people buy things?
2 reasons. They need them or they want them. Simple as that. But there's a difference between marketing to people who need things and marketing to people who want things. And even if you need something, let's think about as simple as toilet paper. You're still going to buy the brand that you want, because part of the art of marketing is helping you identify with a specific brand. You share something with them. You share the values, you share the purpose. You just like the color, you like the advertising or the imagery. That really is the key. Brand recognition is still absolutely vital in today's day and age. But if we think about why customers keep buying, that's more interesting than why they buy in the first place. Customers might buy on price, but something keeps them there. If the only reason you're selling something is because you're the cheapest, as soon as someone drops their prices below yours, the customer will switch. So how do you keep their loyalty? And that is effectively about creating customer satisfaction in a way that makes them really excited about you, your product, your service, your company. And that's where customer storytelling is so important. And the art of customer storytelling, in a nutshell, is that you give customers the opportunity to talk about how happy they are. And then you simply stick that in your marketing, and effectively, your products or services sell themselves.
And of course, customers were once only prospects. So to turn a prospect into a customer, perhaps it's the story that will be the bridge. So what sort of story will turn a prospect into a customer?
Well, we got to think about the various stages of the marketing funnel. Now, originally a marketing funnel looked like this. You put a whole bunch of information at the top of the funnel, and then you nurture people as they get progressively more interested in your journey. Well, in reality, it doesn't work like that. In reality, it's more like a funnel. In reality, a marketing funnel is actually more like a tunnel.
Oh, tunnel, right.
During that progress is that people will go through that journey at their own time and their own pace. They are on a train to the destination. The destination might be your product or it might be someone else's. But if you're able to put customer stories in between that journey, what happens is something really quite exciting. they start to identify with the people who are like them. Think about your experience as an Amazon customer. People who liked this also liked this.
Yes.
What happens? It's social proof.
That's right.
It allows you to identify with a group of people who has a similar bunch of needs or wants that you do. As you progress through a marketing journey, it is the marketer's job to make sure that they can actually excite you about whatever it is. Now, the thing that marketers often get wrong is they think that people only want the story at the end. They don't. They want the story at the beginning and the middle and the end. They think that you can only tell one version of a story. That's not true, because a customer has an experience once they've started with your company all the way to the time that hopefully they become an advocate or they stop using your product. And at every stage of that journey, they may have a different experience and a different story to tell. Marketers also think that you have to have a big, important brand talking about how much they love you. That's also not true. Any human interaction spoken with clarity and coherence can be a really compelling point of evidence for someone who wants to buy your product or service.
You talk about origin stories, and is that more important for the team members working in the business rather than with prospects to turn them into customers, or is it good for both?
Everything. I'm going to quote a fellow who I got to know recently, Robert Tigg. Now, Robert talks about stories in three ways. He says there are three types of stories. There are stories that shape you, stories that changed you, and stories that confine you. Now, he's talking about this from a personal development perspective, but origin stories come from all three of those elements. The thing that a lot of people in leadership are missing is the ability to be vulnerable. And if you're vulnerable, you allow yourself to make a human connection with someone that is deeper. So you said, is it just for stories for your team that you tell your origin story, or is it to help a prospect become a customer? Well, if you think about some of the best loved brands at the moment, what happens is they actually start often with the founder's story. And the founder had a reason that they created this thing in the first place. There are some examples of ethical brands that are apparel brands. Why did they build a really great jumper or backpack or pair of shoes? Because for them, it wasn't just about stepping out into the wonderland of the wilderness. It was actually about building a better product ethically. And that attracts a certain dynamic of people. The origin story is actually, we saw this thing and it made us really angry, and therefore we created a product that solved this issue.
Right.
So their origin story helps their employees feel personally proud of making a difference, but it also helps their prospects identify that they're charging a premium because they have this deep-seated belief in changing the world.
Right. Yes, indeed. So when you talk about managers inviting team members to tell stories and managers capturing stories, have you got any secrets around that and any advice for our listeners? Many of whom are managers.
I have a beautiful story to share, if I may, Nina.
Please.
I was working in a fintech organization in London, and there was a bunch of really, really clever people working there. So in financial technology, you often get really clever people because they have to understand the finances, but they also tend to be quite highly motivated because it's a fast-moving, cutthroat industry. I came in as a contractor to a group of marketers. Now, you wouldn't expect the marketers to be really edgy and antsy. They're not developers, they're not technologists, they're not finance people, but they were. And why? Because all of those people had a healthy dose of imposter syndrome, and it made them think, I am not as clever as the person next to me. I am not as talented. I am not as good. I am not as brilliant or bright. What happened is I observed this and I thought, you know what? I feel like an imposter sitting here, but I've been chosen for a reason. So let me find out, does everyone else in the team feel the same? And we sat down in a team meeting, and I started and said, listen, why don't we go around the room and share what we're afraid of? And I said, here's my thing. I am afraid of not being good enough. I'm afraid that every single person in the room is smarter than me. And help me with that. And it absolutely broke the barriers. Every single person in the room was afraid of something very, very similar.
There was a big Me Too happening then.
Absolutely. What happened as a result is it stopped us from being afraid of each other and ourselves, and it broke down the barriers. And as a consequence, we actually started sharing knowledge to help each other break down the things that we were afraid of.
And you know what? Only successful, smart people have imposter syndrome. The others don't care.
Absolutely. What we did as a result was really interesting. I admitted I had a weakness with spreadsheets. I'm not great at spreadsheets. Another woman who is an absolute whiz at spreadsheets said she had a challenge with her communication skills. All of a sudden, we started learning from each other. All of a sudden, we broke down the barriers. And instead of perceiving that we were somehow competing with the people within our own team, we started being able to collaborate in a totally different way.
Can I swap a spreadsheet to write a long email for you?
Exactly.
Oh, gee, I wish I'd thought of that when I was in the television studio, because I hated doing cash flow forecasts and they were spreadsheets. And I was a whiz at words, just as you are.
Absolutely.
You say that lack of stories from senior management is a real hole in the situation. It invites people to create their own rumors. That's another form of stories that's actually works against productivity and success and motivation. So why don't senior managers tell more stories?
You know, I should have an immediate answer to that question, but I think a lot of it comes down to fear.
Yeah.
Fear and ignorance. Let's think about it. Who tends to rise to the top of an organization? Someone who has an aptitude with numbers, someone who is very clever and astute at understanding what people need, and probably at communicating to a certain extent. But although I love the phrase facts tell, but stories sell, most people perceive that actually a decision is made logically rather than
that, don't they? And they completely forget. I've had arguments with, debates with people about that in presentation skills. It's like, oh, I have to give them all the statistics so they can make an informed decision. I said, yes, but they decide with their heart.
100%, Nina. And that's what happens with particularly senior leaders. They have gone through the ranks by using the facts and the stats to their advantage, which is all very well and good. It's how businesses identify whether they're making a profit or a loss or as much profit as they want. That means they often ignore the role that stories play. And the best case studies, and I've written many case studies in my lifetime, the very, very best ones are the ones that tell a story through numbers.
Oh, yes. Can you give us a little example, a little 1-minute story?
I can talk about a story rather than the customer.
Yeah, that's all right. Yes.
Yeah. When you're working in software, what happens is that people will often identify that they have a problem, and then they'll get to the end and they go, we don't have this problem anymore. But the most compelling case studies and stories are those where they identify how big the problem is in the first place. So they might say, we're spending 40 hours a week processing invoices, or the fact that we have 12 people literally taking a document off of one place and typing it in and putting it somewhere else. The stories become really amazing when they can say, we had 12 people doing that manic, stupid, menial task. And now we have 4 people doing that stupid, manic, menial task. But it's not menial anymore because they can add value to the job that they're doing. Oh, and by the way, the other people, they are doing meaningful work that makes a difference to us and our organization. They're spending time talking to customers, understanding what they need, going the extra mile. Oh, and by the way, those 40 hours that we spent, there are now 4.
Yes. So that's a big productivity saving. Yeah.
Story is the combination of the facts, the numbers, and the humans and the value that they're able to bring. But if they hadn't documented the numbers at the beginning of the journey, it's very hard to tell a combined facts and emotions story. You can still tell an emotion story, but it doesn't pack the same punch as it does if you start with the numbers and then weave a story around the numbers.
Now, you say that managers can use content creation as a team building exercise. Any suggestions?
I have a beautiful story to illustrate that point.
Oh, good.
I was working at an organization based out of Europe with a Finnish designer who was really quite a graphical genius. And we thought, we've got a bunch of really great customer stories, but they're isolated and they're separate. But what if we thought they all have a single common theme? What if we could combine those themes and put them together? Now, normally what happens when you're writing a large piece of content like a white paper is the writer takes all of the information, puts it together, and then hands it over to the designer. And the designer does their magic and you move forward. But what happened instead is that we got the whole team involved. We got ideas from every team member about how can we combine this thing. We got an idea from the graphic designer before she'd even seen the words. And what came out was a document called Recipes for Customer Success. And instead of doing boring case study after boring case study or engaging case study after engaging case study, but just a long list of them, we created a completely new document in the shape of a recipe book.
Oh, that's so simple. It's almost a no-brainer.
Exactly. And we only had one recipe at the end, but it was personalized because it was literally our manager's recipe for a quick smoothie breakfast, right?
Oh.
And it wasn't about the recipes for, making breakfast. It was about the recipes that the customers had used to create their own success through that journey. But we brought it to life using the metaphor of recipes. So rather than having boring emojis, like a clock that's about the time saved or dollars about the money saved, it had a spoon and a ladle and an egg and a whisk. And it totally made a different experience.
And I'm also thinking now you could use the metaphor of a river cruise down the Danube and all the little towns that you drop off, and each one is a case study. Oh, it just springboard.
Pick your metaphor. Yeah. The fact is that case studies and customer stories are hard to get, but once you get them, people just don't use them as well as they should. In my opinion, every single communication you have with a customer or prospect should include some element of a happy customer story. And it can be as short as a single line testimonial or as long as a recipe for customer success book.
And it could be on a website, the company's website. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. You should be plastering your customer success stories over every single aspect of your website. If you can put a quote or a logo on a landing page, do it. If you can put a testimonial in your email footer, do it. If you can plaster a video up somewhere that people wouldn't expect it, do it. Every single place you find an opportunity to put a case study is an opportunity to build that know, like, trust feeling that is so important in sales.
And one of the little tips I give people is use the voice memos or the dictation app on your phone more often. And especially the manager can do that. The minute you start hearing a team member sharing a good news story, just give permission, at team meetings, when I hear a good story, is it okay if I press play? And you'll forget that I'm recording you. And then we can do a transcript. And because the other thing is I'll say, go away and write it up. Well, that's, who wants to do that? But if you've got a transcript, then it's half of it's done. You just have to tweak it and make it look good. So that's my little secret. You also recommend Passel as a method, as an app, but do you still recommend that, or is ChatGPT taken over?
ChatGPT and Passel perform very different functions.
All right.
Passel they should have used this as their strapline. They never did. Think about taking the hassle out of thought leadership with Passel.
Yes, they should have done that. However, they're based in Oxfordshire, aren't they?
That's right. And in fact, they've taken the world by storm in the legal sector, because what they discovered was their app, which is effectively gamification of writing. It's enabling your teams to compete with other teams by putting out beautiful stories that engage your internal audience, if that's the way you want to play it, or your external audience. And so they found that lawyers are well, they have the curse of knowledge. They can't unknow what they already know, but
Yeah.
often they suffer from imposter syndrome and they think that everyone else knows what they know, forgetting that, of course, people don't, especially their prospects. They have no idea. So you talked about Passel versus ChatGPT. What Passel does is it gives people who often have a problem with being able to get over writer's block, that fear of the blank page. It helps them create a comment by using existing stuff on the web and using that as a starting point to push off whatever idea they have. And ChatGPT does something similar, but it's very much an individual exercise. And it's more of a, well, here's something I've been thinking about. Can I give you some instructions to improve it in some way? Whereas Passel is actually just about creating an entire journey with your team and enabling them to be truly themselves. No robots involved.
So tell us how can people work with you? You're based in Australia. I don't know if you travel outside or whether you do virtual to the wider globe, but tell us what you do and where you do it.
So thank you for that brilliant question. I work all over the world. Most of my clients are based out of Europe, in fact. Time zone differences work in our favor because we can have a meeting at the end of our day, and by the time they come back to their desk the next morning, we've had an entire day's worth of activity to catch up on. People can find me on LinkedIn. Please, if you're listening to this, reach out and connect with me. But what do? I am the CEO's voice. I am the wind beneath their wings. I am the person standing behind the person who gets a standing ovation. Oh. And the reason I do that is because if you can create a difference with one person, that's great. But if you can inspire a leader who has thousands or even tens of thousands of people who look up to them to make a difference, that impact is amplified. And that's what makes all of the difference. When leaders are truly excited about what they share, that excitement is almost contagious.
Gina Balarin, it's been a true pleasure and delight speaking with you today. It's very inspiring, and I really urge anybody listening to contact Gina, at least connect with her on LinkedIn and get to know the sort of information that she shares. But thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you for having me, Nina. It's been a pleasure.
This episode, we've been speaking with Gina Balarin on the Manage Self Lead Others podcast for experienced and aspiring people managers. I'm your host, Nina Sunday. Thanks for listening. Contact details are in the show notes. Remember to subscribe and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Catch you next time.
Nina Sunday is on a mission to help leaders transform culture. To book Nina Sunday CSP to speak at your conference, visit ninasunday.com to request a proposal. Nina travels from Brisbane, Australia for in-person presentations Australia-wide. Twice certified virtual presenter, Nina Sunday presents virtually, globally, for any time zone.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.